The first half of the current campaign once again showed what strong and firm foundation Real Madrid have as an institution, and all sorts of adversities, starting from the barrage of devastating injuries and finishing with the gradual generational change of leading players, just underlined this impression. Despite the constant flow of issues, the team went through the first part of the season in a smooth, steady, and almost undramatic way. It was a classic business as usual case. Perhaps the key detail is the modest attitude of the players and head coach, who are well aware of the fact that nothing special has been done yet, in spite of the string of really good results. As for Florentino Perez, with regards to him, this statement is doubly true. The president of almost any other club would have tried to keep a manager with Ancelotti's profile, accomplishments, and current positive dynamic, whatever it takes, and as soon as possible, given the interest from the Brazilian Federation of Football, which is so active and obvious that many even a few days ago thought that the Italian will be in charge of the most decorated national team on the planet right after his contract with Real Madrid expires, in other words, in a half a year time. But Perez was in no hurry at all to extend Ancelotti's contract, and it's not been caused by the lack of confidence or even by the venerable age of Carlo. In his 64, he will turn 65 in the next June. The tactician, in terms of energy, commitment, and appetite to work, could give odds to almost all colleagues who are 15-20 years younger than him. The only reason why the president of Real Madrid postponed this decision was very simple. It's been too early under these circumstances. Firstly, Perez wanted to ensure that the club will be in the right position to finish the campaign with some silverware, which should give a clear indication that the team is on the right track and is functioning well. It's an absolutely crucial thing, bearing in mind that Ancelotti is traditionally at his absolute best, when he rather should preserve the assets of his collective than invent something. On top of that, the wise and experienced Florentino strongly believed that the Real Madrid option is a top priority for the Italian. Simply put, Carlo would have agreed to move to Brazil only in the event that his contract in the Spanish capital won't have been renewed. The truth is that both sides knew what they exactly want and what the score is, and perhaps even the scenario in which the uncertainty regarding Carlo's future would have been remained until April or late May won't hinder the focus and composure of the team. Anyhow, Perez decided to not take chances and, using the traditional Christmas break, extended the contract of the head coach for 2 more years, until 2026, in order to give him and players an extra comfort and peace of mind. It's worth explaining that as conservative as he is, Ancelotti this term certainly demonstrated his ability to adapt and added new colors to his palette. At the dawn of the managerial career in the distant mid-1990s, the Italian was a staunch adept of a rigid 4-4-2 scheme, to such extent that in 1997, while coaching Parma, he vetoed the transfer of Roberto Baggio, having by that point a well-established and prolific attacking duo in the form of Hernan Crespo and Enrico Chiesa at his disposal. Carlo didn't see Roberto in this zone, whereas Baggio, with his more than apparent lack of work rate and movement, could hardly be even an attacking midfielder. But during the following stint at Juventus, Ancelotti visibly changed his mind due to the presence of Zinedine Zidane in the squad and started to use a 4-3-1-2 alignment. After that, the Italian deployed almost all the tactical formations and even played without a genuine striker both at Napoli and Real Madrid, when Karim Benzema suffered from persistent muscular injuries during the last campaign. In that sense, the absence of a classic centre-forward on the pitch in the most matches of Real Madrid this term wasn't something entirely new, but Ancelotti definitely offered another interpretation of more or less the same tactical scheme. Whilst Dries Mertens at Napoli was playing as a false nine, and Rodrigo, who used to replace, at least nominally, Benzema, also has been mainly floating around the box, Jude Bellingham likes to bust into the penalty area, starting his moves from afar, even from the middle of the field at times. Unique blend of athleticism, speed, stamina, and explosiveness allows him to be in the right place almost instantly, and Ancelotti gladly uses this strength on a constant basis. At least 10 goals out of 17 that the prodigy scored so far in the Real Madrid shirt in the official games could be described as typical for a striker. Meanwhile, the ex-Borussia Dortmund star has also a pretty effective long shot. He could enter to the box through a dribble, and in addition to it, he could not only outrun and outmuscle, but also outsmart his counterparts. On top of that, Jude is a pretty versatile footballer in terms of his skills. In a nutshell, he is as much a box-to-box player as is an attacking midfielder. Bellingham used to recover 3-4 balls per match. He can press and is fluid enough to participate in various phases of one playing sequence. Finally, it's absolutely transparent that Primera is an ideal platform for the Briton to showcase his talents, even more so than Bundesliga was, although Jude blossomed there too. The explanation is quite clear. While in Germany the playing style is all about high tempo, intensity and relentless end-to-end action, in Spain football is more intellectual and technical. Put another way, in the supersonic Bundesliga, the athleticism and stamina of Bellingham weren't so much pronounced, whereas in Spain he looks like an absolute beast, almost an alien. The same goes to the difference between two clubs. Performing in Dortmund, Jude was a part of a team for which running 120 or even 125 kilometers per contest is a common thing. Meanwhile, Real Madrid of the last several seasons used to be one of the most static teams in Europe, and sometimes even struggled to reach 100 kilometers mark within 90 minutes. In this regard, the physical specimen in the form of Bellingham gave the club much more than just his pure football skills. For a side like Real Madrid to have a player who, aside from his goals and assists, contributes 10 or 11 kilometers of running in certain matches and has been able to not only create but also tackle is a genuine manna from heaven. If the decision to open the middle of attack for Bellingham's runs was akin to masterstroke, otherwise Ancelotti did his usual pretty solid job, carefully and wisely using the numerous resources. Although at the moment Real Madrid are not as deep as it were in the historic 2016-2017 campaign, or even 3 years later, when Zinedine Zidane won La Liga by constantly and masterfully juggling players, the bench strength remains an undeniable trump card. Courtesy to it, even losing Eder Militao for a long period of time, the Italian had 3 envious picks in the center of defense in the shape of David Alaba, Antonio Rüdiger and Nacho. Now, with the atrocious injury of the Austrian, the situation became more complicated, especially if we take into account Nacho's short-term disqualification, but there is little doubt that these adversities can be surmounted with the help of winter transfers or without it. Quite frankly, The second option looks more feasible, keeping in mind how rarely Paris, after his return to the club, resorted to this way of strengthening the squad. Time after time, doing almost faultless job on the summer market, he simply usually had zero reasons to buy or borrow fresh players during mid-season, with the exception of rare emergency situations. Does Real Madrid facing it now? Arguably yes, but one thing is for certain. If the need in the additional central defender would become urgent, it will be rather a young footballer than a veteran who passed his peak. In the meantime, Andrei Lunin and Kepa Arrizabalaga jointly did a decent job in goal. Ironically enough, in the absence of Thibaut Courtois, in whose face Real lost probably the best number one on the planet, the club matched its best total in terms of goals conceded after 18 Primera rounds. And the fact that both the Ukrainian and the Spaniard weren't impeccable just magnifies the overall team's strength and margin of safety. As for midfield, Ancelotti opened the campaign with the clear aim to decrease the playing time of Toni Kroos and Luka Modric in order to gain in speed, resilience and mobility. But both virtuosos once again brilliantly kept their poise and eventually re-established themselves as the protagonists after injuries started to come thick and fast. It would be curious to see whether both the German and the Croat will be able to retain their spots in the first 11 when all the other prominent players of this line would be fully fit. Finally, in the attack, despite the obvious beat on Bellingham's qualities, the Italian wasn't shy at all to use Joselu, a classic centre forward, the tall Spaniard who possesses a great aerial ability. In the previous years, he was virtually the only player in Primera who managed to win a duel against Casemiro or Sergio Ramos, being high in the air, and is decent in passing. Of course couldn't fully compensate the departure of Benzema, but he surely softened the harm caused by it. His presence gives Ancelotti an extra flexibility and makes the play of Real Madrid less predictable. The attacking build-up with Joselu on the pitch and without him looks differently. In the first case, the amount of crosses drastically raises. Besides that, the Spaniard and Bellingham are often swapping places, especially after long passes when the centre forward moves back and accurately sends the ball to the busting Jude, who is ready to attack an open space. In those situations, when Joselu is on the bench, the team relies more on the cutting and passing type of offense, in a typical basketball manner, trying to find a mismatch. So the first half of the season was good, and it bodes well for the second one, with one major question mark. Despite his numerous pluses, Ancelotti has never been a master of physical preparation. Moreover, it is his apparent weak point. As you can see, the teams of the Italian used to abruptly slow down in the second half of the season. In 2022, though, it didn't prevent Real Madrid from winning both Primera and the Champions League, but back then the level of competition in Spain was significantly lower than it is now. With a cozy 10 or even 12 points cushion in hand, the manager of Real Madrid could pace his team, saving energy here and there, the luxury which he can hardly afford today. So Ancelotti should sink hand in his bag of tricks as deep as possible.